the resident minister of the Ramakrishna Vedanta Society of North Texas in the Dallas suburbs and in the Metroplex. And my convent is here in Hollywood. I come back twice a year, so I'm blessed to be with you this evening and speaking on management of the mind. So I'll open with a peace chant. Om Dio Shanti, Antariksham Shanti, Prithvi Shanti, Apa Shanti, Oshadaya Shanti, Vanaspataya Shanti, Vishvedeva Shanti, Brahma Shanti, Sarvam Shanti, Shantireva Shanti, Sama Shantireti, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om, may there be peace on earth, may there be peace in heaven, in the waters, in the herbs and the plants. May peace abide amongst the gods. May peace pervade the universe. May that peace, real peace, manifest in the hearts of all. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So managing the mind through yoga practice. Some of you are long-time practitioners. Some of you may be new. In any case, you're here because you are sincerely interested in learning the techniques of managing the mind. How many of you have studied the Yoga Sutras? Okay. All right, so it's going to be rather an introductory course, but in study, my teacher always suggested that you just don't come to listen, but you interact with what you are hearing and come up with your own methodologies as well. And this is deep diving into serious study, so that you also become the teacher. So let's begin with the 8 limbs of yoga. In Sutra 229, Patanjali tells us, Yama niyamasana pranayama pratyahara dharana dhyana samadhayostav ankani. The 8 limbs of yoga are yama, the various abstentions from evil doing, niyama, the various observances, asana, posture, pranayama, breath control, pratyahara, withdrawal of the mind from sense objects, dharana, concentration, dhyana, meditation, and then samadhi, absorption. These are the 8 limbs of yoga. Now there are a number of books in the bookstore on the Yoga Sutras. How to Know God was a commentary by Swami Pravrajika. There are other wonderful commentaries also online that you can check out and follow along. And as I said, I encourage you to read your holy reading and add to these sutras your own commentary so that it becomes a self-study. So these are 8 different avenues of discipline. And if we follow them, spiritual experience is achievable. Not only that, if we can attain perfection in any one of these yamas or niyamas, other virtues automatically follow in their wake. This is just the way it happens. Because each of these disciplines brings us to perfection. Spiritual insight unfolds within us, and our character undergoes a sea change, and we become noticeably transformed. Now, this transformation is not something that we advertise. It's not something we brag about and say, oh, I've had samadhi, I've had a wonderful meditation, I'm spiritually transformed, I'm a teacher. No, none of that. This is something that takes place internally, and by speaking out what you are is what you are not, because all of this takes place internally. And as the more we keep it internal, the more that spiritual world opens up for us, because that in itself is a huge self-control to refrain from self-praise, to refrain from putting ourselves above others as a spiritual teacher. So let's begin with Sutra 230. Ahimsa satya steya brahmacharya parigraha yamaha. Yama is abstention from harming others, falsehood, theft, incontinence, and greed. So we each have certain tendencies that are very predominant within us. Himsa comes from the instinct of self-preservation, of life, of a reputation, our wealth, etc. And this tendency, along with such other negative tendencies, is what yamas help us to manage so we can channel our energies upward. It's all about collecting what we have and practicing spiritual jujitsu, turning them upward in an upward direction that help us become transformed. Ahimsa, as you probably know, is the counter antidote of himsa, harming others. Satya is the opposite of asatya, untruthfulness. Swami Brahmananda, disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, first president of the Ramakrishna order, said at one time, "Truth is the pillar to which we must always hold while performing any action." Truth. By holding on to truth, we become established in truth. Why such emphasis on truthfulness? We think, oh, I'm truthful, but really are we, to the extent that we need to be as spiritual aspirants? The root of the word satya is sat, which is existence itself. And if we cannot practice truthfulness, we cannot realize that truth, which is sat. Asteya is the opposite of steya, stealing. None of us are stealers. But we don't simply refrain from stealing, but try not to harbor any covetousness, aparigraha, the fourth yama. Aparigraha is the opposite of parigraha, acquisition, covetousness. Swami Brahmananda explains what happens if we're prone to acquisitiveness. He says, as long as a man desires the things of the world, it is not possible for him to have any earnest desire to know God. Now, we may think, well, I'm here, I'm a spiritual aspirant, I don't desire things of the world, but this desire comes in little ways. Oh, that person has such a nice jacket, or that person, they're favored by the Swami. That kind of behavior, that kind of thought process of others having what you want is acquisitiveness, covetousness. Then comes brahmacharya, continence, which is the opposite of abrahmacharya, more broadly, sexual misconduct according to one's station in life. Now, most of us are devotees, householders, married, dating, whatever. Very few of us here are monastics. So how does this apply to all of us? Brahmacharya for monastics is chastity in thought, word, and deed. Why? Swami Vivekananda tells us, because the soul has no sex. Therefore, with brahmacharya, one is affirming and trying to actualize that ideal. But householders also can practice brahmacharya by practicing fidelity to one's spouse, staying firm in that, and practicing moderation in one's life. Sutra 31. Jati desha kala samayana vachinaha sarvabhoma mahavratam. These forms of abstention are universal vows. They must be practiced without any reservations as to time, place, purpose, or caste rules. So we clean the instrument of this mind by practicing the yamas and the niyamas, these abstentions and observances. Any measure of self-control in this regard is called tapas. In other words, by just being here, by making the option to come here and sit and listen and trying to absorb, that is called tapasya. Sutra 32. Shocha samtosha tapaha swadhyayeshvara pranidhanani niyamaha. Purity, contentment, austerity, study, and devotion to God are the niyamas, observances. So what is shocha? It's the desire for cleanliness, the desire to be pure, both externally and internally. How do we do this? Well, first of all, we must change our attitude toward ourselves. We must learn to regard this body as a temple of God, both because God resides within. Most of you who go to meditate, you do a little simple purification, brush your teeth, wash your face, wash your hands, your feet. All of this makes us feel pure. That prepares us with an atmosphere of purity so that when we enter the temple, the mind becomes more purified by that act itself, and we become more easily, readily established in that purity before trying to meditate. The mere act of washing the body has a psychological effect on the mind. We feel purified. We feel we're a fit abode to receive the Lord in our heart. We've done a certain act of washing to prepare that presence in our heart. But internal cleanliness is also important. And throughout the day, dirt accumulates because sometimes we're a victim of kama, passion, anger, krodha, lobha, greed, moha, infatuation or delusion, madha, pride, matsarya, jealousy. These propensities dirty us. They're enemies of our spiritual welfare. So what to do? We develop a higher mind to be able to watch this lower mind. We begin to learn to not identify with this lower mind by developing that part of the mind that can watch the body and the mind. And this comes with meditation. It comes from Vivekananda's famous pratyahara practice that he gave, watching the lake of the mind. He gave that in his Raja Yoga classes. And by watching the lake of the mind, which is the chitta, we see the thoughts that are arising in the mind. Now, who is the seer? It's not the chitta, but it's the buddhi, the higher mind that is watching the lower mind. And what is the buddhi? It is that part of the mind that points back to the witness consciousness, the unseen seer. So if we can develop that quality of watching the mind wherever we are, whether on the street corner or in the chapel meditating, and usually that watching the lake of the mind comes at the beginning of one's meditation, and then one gathers the forces of one's mind and establishes it in the heart, then we begin to exert our own self-control over the lower mind. So what to do in terms of cleanliness? We learn to regulate our mental food intake by what we read, see, and talk about. Now, in spiritual life, it's not so much what we talk about as how we talk about it. There is no subject that we cannot face, but it's what we bring to the subject that determines what quality of mind we have. So in doing that and raising the mind, developing that higher mind, it's very important to try to keep holy company. Vibrations of like-minded spiritual aspirants is a spiritual food, a tangible food, a food that we all need. It's something that we all get when we come into this beautiful temple, whether it's listening to a lecture or whether it's meditating with others. We leave feeling that we have been nourished in a way that we cannot get anywhere else. If it's physically impossible, then we must try to make a daily habit of reading the scriptures and the lives of her holy personalities. And this is something that our teachers stress. Whether or not we come to the temple regularly or not, it prepares the mind for meditation. When we wake up first thing in the morning to simply pick up the Gospel of Ramakrishna or another holy book that you cherish and read just a simple paragraph, that, when your mind is fresh, that goes deep into the mind and prepares the mind for meditation. Samtosha. Whatever we have, we must learn to be satisfied with it. As long as we can live comfortably, plain living, high thinking is the motto. So our thought processes should always try to be at a high level. And we must strive in so doing to be at peace with ourselves and disallow worldly thoughts to disturb us and refrain from obsessing about any chance for our personal gain. These are things that come naturally to us, but as we develop that higher mind to watch for those tendencies and then try to counteract them by going internally and praying to our chosen ideal, to remove those thoughts. Tapas, tapasya, spiritual practice. One method is to toughen ourselves by exposing ourselves to life's contradictions. So over time we develop internal strength and stamina. Then nothing can shake us. We're not running away from the world, but we're facing the world in a different way. By building our willpower to take a higher stance, joy or sorrow, pleasure or pain, whatever comes, we strive to be the witness, to go back to that witness that we felt in the beginning of our meditation when we were watching the lake of the mind. Because as you practice this, what happens? The mind becomes embarrassed. It slows down. And when the mind slows down, then you're able to gather the forces of the mind and bring them in internally. So in the flow of life, we strive to remember the main thing throughout, our spiritual center. There's a wonderful saying. When I was in Santa Barbara and in charge of the gift shop, and we had a calligrapher, a resident nun who was a calligrapher, and I had her write this statement: the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. That's all we have to do in spiritual life. Swadhyaya, self-education. Through study of sacred texts, we try to hook our mind to the highest common factor of that study. I must try to find my true nature. That must be our attitude when we open our book. Who am I? We're also trying to learn how to steady the mind and to increase our devotion. So I encourage, videos are good, but I always encourage reading. Why? It doesn't have to be reading a lot of pages, but there's something about holding a book in your hand. You become a participant. You're not just ingesting from a screen. You become the participant, and when you read something and it gives you pause, then you can put it on pause and think more deeply about what you have just read. You become proactive. And that is what this study in yoga is all about, is becoming a proactive participant. And the clues can be found in the lives of the avatars, reading the lives of the saints and the seers. It doesn't have to be necessarily in trying to navigate the heights of Advaita Vedanta. It can be just in simple reading of the spiritual lives and the examples of these great souls and the truths that they teach, and try to go deeper into these truths by taking those truths with you on a walk, say, trying to chew the cud with the truth that you have read. Try to make it your own, not just something that you have read, but try to imbibe it and make it something that is uniquely yours, with your commentary to it. Ishvara Pranidhana, cultivating devotion to one's chosen ideal. Through worship, japa, constant recollectedness. Ishvara means Godhead. Pranidhana is practicalization of those ideas conveyed to us by Shraddha, faith. Some of you may be initiated, some of you may not be, but one thing about increasing our devotion to a chosen ideal is to choose a path and to choose a bona fide teacher who exemplifies the truth, and to follow the Guru in your spiritual practice, because the Guru, especially in our tradition, comes from a lineage where what is given to the aspirant comes from Sri Ramakrishna himself. So any mantra that is given comes from Sri Ramakrishna himself. So there is the power of the lineage behind what comes to the disciple through the Guru. Pranidhana means we strive to become one-pointed in our mind, so that we will become one with God. And we can strive to become one-pointed in whatever we do, practicing mindfulness in the simplest tasks. And that helps us in our meditation. All of that is preparation. So in the yamas and niyamas, we must cultivate and channel into Ishvara Pranidhana. That is the end. And the means are the disciplines of the yamas and the niyamas. Then Patanjali shows us that when we go to practice, we run into difficulties because our life before our spiritual life was flowing in a different direction. See? So all these past samskaras that we had from time before we found Vedanta, they come to challenge us. This is just natural. So I say, don't fight these. Practice spiritual jujitsu. How do we do this? Okay. Sutra 33. Vitarka bhadane pratipaksha bhavanam. When assailed by thoughts obstructive to yoga, contrary thoughts must be cultivated. Spiritual jujitsu. Patanjali gives us a guideline. If a negative thought takes hold of our mind, we should try to make a conscious effort to think its opposite. For example, we first try to control ourselves in the germ state. Vivekananda explains, when I am angry, my whole mind becomes a huge wave of anger. I feel it, see it, handle it, can easily manipulate it, can fight with it, but I shall not succeed perfectly in the fight until I can get down below to its causes. And he was a man who could get angry. So we can understand and identify. He goes on, a man says something very harsh to me, and I begin to feel that I am getting heated. And he goes on till I am perfectly angry and forget myself, identify myself with anger. When he first began to abuse me, I thought I am going to be angry. Anger was one thing, and I was another. But when I became angry, I was anger. These feelings have to be controlled in the germ, the root, in their fine forms, before even we have become conscious that they are acting on us. So this doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes patience. And Swami Swahananda, he was a wonderful, humble example of that. He was told that he had a problem of anger, and so he was instructed to practice the yoga. And in the end, he was able to overcome that anger. And with that overcoming of any fault that we have, there is a tremendous spiritual strength that comes from within. So any fault, we can turn it and use it as a practice to overcome that fault. And then it's like money in the bank. We become enriched. Swami Brahmananda guided those monks prone to anger to awaken opposite thought waves in the germ state. He said, learn patience. Anger is controlled through patience. Be patient, forbearing, and humble. Humility is a great aid in the building of character. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, he who can forbear lives. He who cannot is lost. So in this way, by preparing the ground, we can then successfully be more alerted and poised to raise counter thoughts when challenged by negative thoughts as they rise. Vivekananda explains for us. When a big wave of anger has come into the mind, how are we to control that? Just by raising an opposing wave. Think of love. Now we can all try that. It takes vigilance to be able to catch ourselves. But then when we try to think of that which we love, and think of love itself, that changes our mood, and it changes the person we're interacting with. Suddenly everything changes. He goes on, sometimes a mother is very angry with her husband, and while in that state the baby comes in, and she kisses the baby. The old wave dies out and a new wave arises. Love for the child. That suppresses the other one. Love is the opposite of anger. Similarly, when the idea of stealing comes, non-stealing should be thought of. When the idea of receiving gifts come, replace it by a contrary thought. So any negative thought that comes to us, we have the power to replace it with an opposing thought. That is spiritual jujitsu. Through constant practice, unwanted thoughts are eventually displaced. So what are the numbers and depths of these obstacles that we've just talked about? Well, verse 34 goes into it quite extensively. Vitarka himsa adaya krita karita anumodita loba krodha moha purva kaha mritu madhya adimatra dukkha agya ananta phalaha iti pratipaksha bhavanam. The obstacles to yoga, such as acts of violence and untruth, may be directly created, indirectly caused, or approved. They may be motivated by greed, anger, or self-interest. They may be small, moderate, or great, but they never cease to result in pain and ignorance. So the combination of all of these amounts to 81 different types of imbalance within us. So these are 81 types of himsa, directly or indirectly created or approved, motivated by greed, anger, self-interest, small, moderate, or intense. Take anger. How to get out of anger. There's the analytical approach. For example, I've suffered from anger. I've embarrassed myself by my anger. I have nowhere to hide my face or words to express my apologies. Can't I outgrow this? No more will I be a victim of this. Then there is the act of cultivating the opposite quality. Say, for example, someone is angry with me. Let me withdraw. That habituated anger then becomes eroded when it receives no support from me. This is spiritual ingenuity, spiritual jujitsu, to react in the way you wish, not driven by destructive emotions. This personally motivated resourcefulness becomes a spiritual adventure. You can try this on yourselves. How to get around our negative emotions through vitarka bhavanam. So not only must we be aware of our own negative tendencies, such as anger, but the degree in which it can become inflamed, for example, mild, medium, or intense. And when we see the intensity grow, we must work harder to counteract it. So we ourselves become the observer and the teacher and the resolver of these impediments that we begin to see within ourselves. Now, another thing is, often when we enter spiritual life, we think, oh my God, I never was so bad when I was out in the world. Well, my teacher used to say, no, it's like a black speck showing up on a white background. When we enter spiritual life, the mind, we're trying to whiten it, and so we see all the little black specks that were always there in the mind. But by seeing them, you gain power over them, and you're able to quell them, and eventually until they disappear. They attenuate and disappear. When we see two people quarreling, and we have the capability to stop it, but instead enjoy it, we are also culpable of himsa rather than ahimsa. These are the subtle ways that we begin to make friends with ourselves in a deeper way. We begin to see the areas where we can improve. So don't be discouraged. The deeper you dive into the ocean of spiritual life, the more you will see the distractions of the mind, but the more power you will gain to overcome the weaknesses of the mind. Swami Sridharananda, a wonderful holy man, disciple of Swami Virajananda, explains, ahimsa means you don't become violent, you don't incite violence, you don't enjoy others engaging in violent behavior. So what are the effects of perfection in any one of the yamas? Sutra 35. Ahimsa pratishtayam tat sanidho vairityagaha. When the yogin is established in non-harming others, then all living creatures will cease to feel enmity in his presence. Swami Krishnananda, who was the attendant to Swami Pravrajika, we saw that quality manifest in him. Extreme nonviolence. Another incredible example is St. Francis of Assisi. One of my brother monks said he was, in terms of what he attained in his spiritual life, he was right there on the realm of an Ishvarakoti. Animals, birds, creatures would come to him. They had no fear. Non-harming others is a power, psychological force to which humans and animals are sensitive. And there's a beautiful example in Swami Brahmananda's life. He was an Ishvarakoti, first president of the order, an ever-free soul. And he was established in all virtues, such as non-violence. Swami Pravrajika used to tell us in the convent, at one time Swami Brahmananda was walking with another disciple and myself. This is Swami Prabhupananda's words. He was slightly ahead of us. Suddenly we heard a shout, "Out of the way, there's a mad bull." An instant later, we saw the bull itself rushing towards us. There was no time to run. My brother disciple and I tried to get in front of Maharaj to protect him, but he raised his arms and pushed us back. Although he was now an elderly man, he was still extraordinarily strong. As the bull approached, with lowered head, there was a moment's pause. Maharaj stood still, confronting it. Then the bull stopped, shook its head from side to side, lifted it, and walked quietly away. Ahimsa is a power. Sutra 36. Satya pratishtayam kriyabhala shrayatvam. When a man becomes steadfast in his abstention from falsehood, he gets the power of obtaining for himself and others the fruits of good deeds without having to perform the deeds themselves. For one established in truth, truth follows their words. And here the concept of Satya is raised to a spiritual, eternal, real point of view. For example, when Christ proclaimed, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," what did he mean? For the avatar who is established in truth, truth follows their words. That is why on January 1st, when Sri Ramakrishna said to householder devotees at Kasipur Garden House, "May you all be illumined," those present were illumined. Truth followed his words. Buddha also said, "I have become one with the truth," and the light of truth he saw in all. By Satya we also understand another deep meaning. It is the eternal truth, which is the will of the divine, manifesting itself in the cosmos. Swami Sridharananda said, "Truth is the flow of happening in this world." So beautiful, the flow of happening in this world. One who experiences this knows, as an observer, I am an eternal witness, not involved with likes or dislikes, and without allowing my ego to intervene. So I see all is happening by the will of God. He continues, "For those whose personal likes or dislikes are like spice that we can put onto which has no spice. My likes and dislikes enhance my ego only, and I interpret all that is happening according to my colored vision. That is not truth." So there are three effects of truth. Satya pratishtayam, truthfulness in speech. When we are absolutely poised in this conviction, what we experience is expressed in exactitude. Second, when we are immersed in truth in our thought world, our whole being is saturated with truth, and we realize then the will of God. We actually realize that. Sri Ramakrishna gave the parable, an old man who saw God's will in everything. He saw a burglar thieving something and he escaped. The police came and performed an inquest. The old man enjoyed the show, and the police asked him what had happened. But the police thought that he was the culprit and presented him to court. The judge asked the old man, "What happened? You are pretending not to be the burglar. But you saw the burglar. Why didn't you stop him?" "Because you are the burglar." But the old man explained, "I was simply enjoying the sun by God's will. By God's will I saw the burglar rob, and by God's will he escaped. And by God's will the police came, and by God's will they think I am the criminal. And by God's will the court was convinced I was innocent, and by God's will I was finally set free." So, in other words, we must try to see the will of God in every moment of our lives, and that is even through trials and tribulations. Those trials and tribulations, if you are a spiritual aspirant, will strengthen you Make them your tapasya. Be the conqueror, not the victim. Allow them to transform your life. Third, satya kataham, the state wherein we have tuned ourselves to truth in such a way that whatever we may say will happen. There's a beautiful example of this. In June 1900, Miss Minnie Book offered Vivekananda 160 acres of land in the San Antonio Valley in California. On accepting the land from Miss Book, Swami Vivekananda spoke to Swami Turiyananda, who had been lecturing and holding classes at the New York Vedanta Society since April. He spoke of his intention to send him to California at once to lead the Vedanta movement there and establish the Shanti Ashram, or peace retreat. If none of you have ever been there, this is a place that really you must go. He established something there on the 300 acres. It's something you can tangibly feel. Swami Turiyananda was devoted to meditation and austerity, however, and always hesitated to plunge himself into work. Therefore, he was averse to this idea. And failing to prevail on him by argument, the Swami said at last, "It is the will of the mother that you should take charge of the work there." Swami Turiyananda said jokingly, "Rather say it is your will. Certainly you have not heard the mother communicate her will to you in that way. How can we hear the words of the mother?" Vivekananda responded, "Yes, brother, yes. The words of the mother can be heard as clearly as we hear one another. It only requires a fine nerve to hear the words of the mother." The Swami said this with such fervor that Swami Turiyananda could not but accept his wish as expressing the will of the Divine Mother, and he cheerfully agreed to take charge of the California work. And when you read with the Swamis in America and India, you read about Swami Turiyananda, what he established there, and then the correspondence between Swami Atulananda, who was there, and some of the ashramites, such as Ujjala, you began to see the tremendous love that develops among those devotees, something tangible. Turiyananda made them saints. When one practices truth in thought, word, and deed, such a person has tuned themselves to God in such a way that whatever they say will happen. It doesn't happen easily. It happens with total transformation of human personality. And when I come to this segment, I remember Swami Pravrajika in Santa Barbara. I joined in 1973, and it's on, on 50 acres, 12 acres that are cultivated. But one of our major tapasyas was to garden every day, just like Swami Brahmananda gave him the tapasya of gardening every day. And one day, one of our junior nuns, she climbed the orange tree. And when Swami Prabhupada said, "Don't climb the tree, you will fall." And then he caught himself and he said, "Oh no, you must immediately come down and never climb the tree again." In other words, truth follows the words of a holy man. Sutra 37. Asteya pratishtayam sarva ratnopasthanam. When one is established in non-stealing, all wealth comes to him. Asteya means not being the victim of greed. I will have only what God wants me to have. Greed is a desire to have more money. Reputation, that's a form of greed. Possessions. So we must, by hook or by crook, eradicate greed and ownership from the mind. We must try not to succumb to asking for things in life. But if we want to desire, let's turn that desire toward desiring our true original nature. Spiritual jujitsu. Turn that desire for outward things internally into the desire for God. When one gives up external desires, he or she becomes so tranquil and centered that people offer the best they have. Why? Because within them the desire to want has disappeared. We become better workers. We become better people. We want nothing from other people. People want us. They want us because we have given up that desire, that craving for other things. In Sri Ramakrishna's case, the Divine Mother showed the Master that she had sent 4 suppliers to take care of his spiritual needs. He had no desires, so Mother sent these. Mathur Babu, the proprietor of Dakshineshwar Temple and Compound, Balaram Basu, whose Calcutta family members had been devotees for generations, Shambhu Malik, who served the Master and Holy Mother for about 4 years before his own death, and Surendranath of Simla, a half-supplier, who helped with the rent for the Kasipur garden house. So when we give up that desire for ownership, and that's not to say that you should give up your home and go out and just pitch a tent on the street and become homeless. No, no. But give up that craving for more and more and more. Sutra 38. Brahmacharya pratishtayam virya labhaha. By being established in continence, one acquires spiritual energy. So the sex idea is prominent in most minds and consumes a good deal of our vital force. When the sex idea is sublimated and controlled, an aspirant gains a gigantic willpower and spiritual energy, and that is utilized for higher pursuit of self-transformation and God realization. Now, in terms of married life, the counsel has always been, have 1 or 2 children and then live as brother and sister. So live a full married life, but then in later life become spiritual co-partners in your life, helping one another to attain the goal. When Swami Vivekananda was asked, who can come by that oratorical power of expounding philosophy which you have? He said that power comes to him who observes unbroken brahmacharya for a period of 12 years, with the sole object of realizing God. I have practiced that kind of brahmacharya myself, he said, and so a screen has been removed, as it were, from my brain. For that reason, I need not any more think over or prepare myself for any lectures on such a subtle subject as philosophy. Now his case was extreme. He went on, suppose I have to lecture tomorrow. He confided, all that I shall speak about will pass tonight before my eyes like so many pictures. And the next day I put into words during my lecture all those things that I saw. So you will understand now that it is not any power which is exclusively my own. Whoever will practice unbroken brahmacharya for 12 years will surely have it. So this is the science behind brahmacharya. Furthermore, Brahmananda said, if one remains continent for 12 years, he attains the highest. Now this is a tall challenge, not something that we take lightly. We strive for that. Sutra 39. Aparigraha sterya janma katanta sambhotaha. When one becomes steadfast in non-receiving, he gains knowledge of his past, present, and future existence. Vivekananda explained, when a man does not receive presents, he does not become beholden to others, but remains independent and free. His mind becomes pure. He goes on, with every gift he is likely to receive the evils of the giver. If he does not receive, the mind is purified, and the first power it gets is memory of past life. Memory of past life. Then alone the yogi becomes perfectly fixed in his ideal. He sees that he has been coming and going many times, so he becomes determined that this time he will be free, that he will no more come and go, and be the slave of nature. Swami Sarvagatananda, disciple of Swami Kandananda, a wonderful soul, he was the former head of the Providence and Boston Centers, once shared the advice of a wise old Swami. If anyone gives you something, it is not yours, it is Sri Ramakrishna's. Do not take it for yourself, it is his. And in that way, such gifts will not harm us as spiritual aspirants. It's not to say that when someone gives us something, we say, oh no, I don't want that. No, we accept it, but we offer it to the Lord. What are the effects of perfection in any one of the niyamas? Shocha, purity; samtosha, contentment; tapaha, austerity; swadhyaya, study; ishvara pranidhana, devotion to God. Sutra 40, purity. Shochat swangat jugupsa parar asam sargaha. As a result of purity, there arises indifference towards the body and disgust for physical intercourse and future existences. Vivekananda explains, when there is real purification of the body, external and internal, there arises neglect of the body, and the idea of keeping it nice vanishes. Now, we're not like those sadhus in Rishikesh that wear rags and, haggard, they don't shave, they don't do this or that. No, we're a little different in the Ramakrishna order. So we take this, the spirit of this, in a different way. Vivekananda says, a face which others call most beautiful will appear to the yogi as merely animal if there is not intelligence behind it. What the world calls a very common face, he regards as heavenly if the spirit shines behind it. When there is real purification of the body, external and internal, there arises neglect of the body, and the idea of keeping it nice vanishes. And with it comes a sea change inside. Our idea of beauty changes. For example, Swami Krishnananda, he was Swami Prabhavananda's attendant. He was brilliant, he was a Harvard graduate, but feature for feature, he was ugly. And yet there was such a spiritual quality that shone through his face that he was beautiful to perceive, simply beautiful. In this connection, Mary Funke, an American disciple of Vivekananda, once asked her guru a rather daring question. On one occasion she wrote, I found myself wondering just how some of the beautiful society queens of the West would appear to him, Vivekananda, especially those versed in the art of allurement. And before I took time to think, out popped the question, and immediately I was covered with confusion. The Swami, however, looked at me calmly with his big, serious eyes and gravely replied, if the most beautiful woman in the world were to look at me in an immodest or unwomanly way, she would immediately turn into a hideous green frog, and one does not, of course, admire frogs. That was Vivekananda. Purity. Moreover, one achieves purification of the heart, cheerfulness of the mind, power of concentration, control of the passions, and fitness for the vision of the Atman. So says Patanjali. As the aspirant's mind becomes purified, he or she no longer identifies with the body. Swami Prabhavananda explained in his Yoga Sutra commentary, therefore he grows indifferent to it, regarding it as a mere external garment, which is neither new nor clean. Furthermore, he ceases to desire the bodies of others, since he no longer identifies those bodies with the consciousness that inhabits them. So purity of heart, it expresses itself more and more as a sattva guna as we advance in spiritual life. The guna of spiritual insight and joy. Swami Vivekananda said, The first sign that you are becoming religious is that you are becoming cheerful. To the yogi, everything is bliss. Every human face that he sees brings cheerfulness to him. Misery is caused by sin and by no other cause. What business have you with clouded faces? It is terrible. If you have a clouded face, do not go out that day. Shut yourself up in your room. What right have you to carry this disease out into the world? Good advice. Vivekananda. Sutra 42, Contentment. Samtoshad anutamaha sukha labhaha. From purity comes unsurpassed happiness. So purity brings with it desirelessness. When we live without desire, we live in the depths of the present moment. We feel no anxiety. Now this is a gradual process of evolution. We can judge for ourselves. Oh, somebody did something to us. We got angry. We regained our mental balance. We even were able to smile at that person. And we realized, oh, 5 years ago, I could not have done that. So these are the little milestones that come to us in our spiritual path. Purity brings with it desirelessness. Without desire, we feel genuine happiness. Swami Prabhavananda explained the joy of the Atman is always within us. It can be released at any time by breaking down the barriers of desire and fear which we have built up around it. We can just do it by deconstructing this fear. What is this fear? Where is it coming from? What is it doing to my body? Am I this fear? No, I am something separate from this fear. There is a saying, be content with externals, but practice divine discontentment. As Swami Brahmananda explained, contentment with external conditions, yes, but never be contented with your state of spiritual growth. Become dissatisfied. Try to move ever onward in your search. Do not stop until you have found the diamond mind. We're coming to the end now. Sutra 43, Tapas. Kayendriya siddhir asuti kshaya tapasaha. As a result of austerity, impurities are removed. Then special powers come to the body and the sense organs. The first literal interpretation of siddhi is that through sadhana, limitations of the body and the mind fade away, since we're no longer preoccupied with our body consciousness. Our body, mind, and senses become refined and stronger and more fit instruments for yoga. The second literal interpretation is that of siddhi. Sadhana refines our sense perceptions and thus awakens our powers of the mind. We're able to read more thoroughly the content of a person's mind by simply looking at their face, seeing their eyes, the expression in their eyes. The mind becomes more subtle. Our ability to read things becomes more subtle. Sutra 44, Swadhyaya. As a result of study, one obtains a vision of that aspect of God one has chosen to worship. So study means not only scriptural study, but repetition of the mantra, the holy name of one's chosen ideal. And this refers to other sutras. For example, in the first chapter, Sutra 27, Tasya Vajaka Pranavaha. His manifested word is Om. Pranava is a sound symbol representing Ishvara, the ground of existence. Sutra 45, the last sutra. Samadhi siddhir Ishvara pranidhanat. As a result of devotion to God, one attains samadhi. This and the preceding sutra refer to bhakti yoga, expressed by ritual worship, prayer, and japam. It can also be karma yoga, which is a form of worship, work as worship, when we offer it to our chosen ideal. Swami Prabhupada explained, it is the cultivation of a direct, intense, personal relationship between worshipper and worshipped. In the practice of bhakti yoga, some special aspect of God or some divine incarnation is chosen so that the devotee's love may become more easily concentrated. For those who are naturally drawn to this approach, it is probably the simplest of all. And there is no doubt that the great majority of believers in all the world's major religions are fundamentally bhakti yogis. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. Thank you for sharing. I wish we had time for questions, but the hour is up. Thank you.